My fellow Americans, we're passing through a time of testing. But in the midst of this global pandemic, just as our nation had begun to recover, we've seen violence and chaos in the streets of our major cities. President Trump and I will always support the right of Americans to peaceful protest. But rioting and looting is not peaceful protest. Tearing down statues is not free speech. And those who do so will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Last week, Joe Biden didn't say one word about the violence and chaos engulfing cities across this country. So let me be clear. The violence must stop, whether in Minneapolis, Portland, or Kenosha. Too many heroes have died defending our freedom to see Americans strike each other down. We will have law and order on the streets of this country for every American of every race and creed and color. President Trump and I know that the men and women that put on the uniform of law enforcement are the best of us. Every day, when they walk out that door, they consider our lives more important than their own. People like Dave Patrick Underwood, an officer in the Department of Homeland Security's Federal Protective Service, who was shot and killed during the riots in Oakland, California. Dave's heroism is emblematic of the heroes that serve in blue every day. And we're privileged tonight to be joined by his sister, Angela. Angela, we say to you, we grieve with your family. And America will never forget or fail to honor Officer Dave Patrick Underwood. The American people know we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement and standing with our African American neighbors to improve the quality of their lives, education, jobs, and safety. And from the first days of this administration, we've done both. And we will keep supporting law enforcement and keep supporting our African American and minority communities across this land for 4 more years.
Speaking of whitewashing, as I believe the Vice President did to a large degree about their record when it comes to the coronavirus pandemic, again, the U.S. with less than 5% of the world's population has more than 20% of the world's deaths, according to official numbers. Speaking of whitewashing, they talked about the violence in the streets, including in Kenosha, Vice President Pence did. There was no specific mention of the fact that the 17-year-old who has been accused of murdering 2, we believe they were protesters, is, according to his social media accounts, a Trump supporter. Now, again, that does not mean that President Trump is responsible at all for that violence, but the way that the Vice President portrayed it, the violence was out of control, liberals, leftists, progressives, and Vice President Biden, Joe Biden, isn't going to do anything about it. He said that Biden didn't say one word about the violence and chaos engulfing cities across the country, although he added last week, because earlier today, Joe Biden did condemn the violence. But no mention at all about the apparently far-right individual in Kenosha who murdered 2 people. And on that note, I should also add that the Department of Homeland Security Federal Protective Service officer David Patrick Underwood, who was killed and his widow was in the audience, the Vice President Pence referred to him as having been killed during the riots in Oakland. No mention of the fact that the